I'm sure everything's always meant to be a conversation. So thank you for coming. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. So one thing that I've just been learning how to do is making candles. So this is kind of what started the whole conversation between Melanie and I for me to come and just do a brief presentation for you guys today and have a chat around raising pigs. So I'm just going to leave this burning so you guys can have a little bit of an idea of like how well it burns and obviously the amount of heat that it obviously provides also. So anyways, I'm Charlie Glenn, Acres. Some of you here know me and some of you may not. I currently sell at the farmers market in Salmon Arm, both in, not in just Salmon Arm, but also I was in Sorrento last year and then Scotch Creek and Salissa selling my meat products. So yeah, I'm just going to give you guys like a bit of a brief like introduction to myself. And if you guys have any questions throughout the presentation, feel free to stick up your hand and ask, and we can just kind of go through this more casually than anything else. So anyways, for myself, I grew up farming. I come from a background of entrepreneurs, both my mother and my father. Basically started out here dairy farming in the early 70s. And my grandparents had kind of immigrated here from Holland and started farming back in the early 60s. So with that being said, my background in farming actually led me to going to university to get a diploma in landscape horticulture. And with that, my 2-year plan took me to the city, and then it ended up being a 4-year degree program that I ended up entering into, simply because the knowledge that I was learning in my 3rd and 4th year was just, I found more advantageous and just more common knowledge and just more useful information at the stage when I did go to university. So I started university when I was 30, and then I came out with a bachelor's in horticulture science with a major in urban ecosystems. So after arriving home, I took on a small job working for the city of Armstrong, working in the landscape industry there, but then slowly shifted out of that and kind of took a bit of a break from that, and then I was just kind of jumped back into farming. And one of the main reasons that brought me back into farming was some adverse events that happened within our region, which was the wildfires of Monty Lake. So at this time, I took over for some previous farmers who were looking at getting out of the industry. And they were kind of ramping up, but then the wildfires were kind of coming towards the property at the same time. So I looked at it as an opportunity to not only take over for these people and start a farming business, as I had a background in it and been away from it for 17 years. But like I say, with that being said, it also taught me that diversity is key. And when I talk about diversity, I'm not just going to speak just solely about pigs today. I'm also going to talk about poultry and other animals that you can raise on your farm. Well, we'll touch base on that. If there's any questions, we can go back to that. So yeah, I ended up purchasing 450 meat birds, 100 turkeys, and 22 pigs from these people. And I'm telling you, I had been away from farming for 17 years and never ventured into this scale before, as I was raised by my mother, and we just kind of did more of your general hobby farming kind of thing, where we raised basically every animal for our own self-use, I guess. And then, yeah, so like I say, when I met these people, I saw it as a really amazing opportunity. But also to get back into something that I was kind of born and raised with. So yeah, and I have on here, being prepared for fluctuating market demands and challenges. So one thing I want to mention here is that last year, towards the end of my season last November, I guess it would have been 2021, was when the floods and everything happened to wash out the Coquihalla, and how that really brought to terms about food sovereignty and food security in our region. So at this point in time, I had no sales really for any of my product, but I saw it as like an amazing opportunity to get myself out there and start selling and dispersing of this product that I'd raised and put in freezers. So I feel that by raising animals, I'm contributing to a more resilient food system, and again, creating food sovereignty and food security within our region. And so this also matches up with the Shuswap Food Charter, which their aim is to have local food that is nutritious and ethically produced within our region. And what I'm doing also lined up with their vision, which is the purchasing and servicing of foods within our local region.
Where did you find that?
I found it within the charter. It would have been in, so it's within the Shuswap food charter.
But where did you where did you find that document?
It was on one of their websites.
Who, the CSRD or?
I don't have it listed on here with my references, but I do have a list of it though.
Okay, I'm really curious to
yeah, because when I was in university, we also looked at just basically kind of everything that we're doing here in the Shuswap as keeping food local, and then just looking at the land regions that aren't being used and how we can create a more resilient local food systems, essentially, right? So we had to review the city's policies and stuff like that, and to help them do analysis and potential growth for the regions. But yeah, so there is a food charter, and I found it in that. So yeah, so I got a little example of what I do on my farm. So I believe in free ranging whenever possible, so long as you have a perimeter fence. So these are my little pigs. When they were first born, they're probably about, I want to say probably 8 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks. And this is my dog. So these guys, they basically stick around the yard. They don't go too far from their mom, who's in an electric fenced area. But these little guys, they would get out underneath because I didn't have the proper pig paneling, I guess you would say, for that. But like I say, they didn't really go far. So again, I believed in a pasture grazed diets, obviously. So this is just one example of my animals this year. And kind of you can see there's lots of burdock and there's lots of weeds in this area. And this I found was really amazing come fall, when most of the plant material was kind of eaten back, and the one thing that was thriving was the burdock. So the pigs actually went after the burdock, and then they even rooted quite deeply for it too. As you know, the taproot for burdock goes quite far into the soil. So basically by having pastured grass-fed diets, the animals are attaining phytonutrients from the plants that they're eating, and the phytochemicals that are found within those plants are then passed directly through the animal and into the meats and the fats that you're going to be eating. So that's where most of your omega-3s and omega-6 comes from. And like I say, the phytochemicals are found to be anti-inflammatory, anti-carcinogenic, and cardioprotective. So another reason why you should be eating grass-fed animals opposed to grain-fed. So like I say, there's a bit of a comparison between the pastured and the strictly grain-fed. So in a grain-fed diet, those animals aren't going to see any of these added nutrients throughout the meat and the fats. I did a little bit of research, just trying to look at the different scenarios. There's lots of research being done at Kwantlen now, which was the university that I went to, but I wasn't doing the agriculture side of things. But they're now doing studies on pasturing pigs, what types of crops are most efficient for them, and say through one of the studies that I found that you can actually offset 50% of the feed costs by doing a pastured animal or strictly grain-fed, which is quite substantial when it comes down to your overall costs. And we'll kind of talk a little bit about that too. If you guys are looking at obviously raising pigs, it comes with a pretty heavy burden on costs when it's just reliant on grain and also species, what breed of pig you choose to raise. So yeah. So the benefits of rotational grazing. obviously it would be increased soil fertility, and you're going to get fewer illnesses amongst your herd because my animals are not contained and they're constantly being moved around. They're not confined to a dirty area, right? And they're getting exposure to new soil all the time, essentially. So it also maximizes the productivity of your land, whether you're doing pigs or cattle, and even chickens, like I say. And then you can also concentrate with pigs. One thing I found, we had weeds that were really intensive, so areas where the burdock was really prolific, and areas where like thistle was really bad on the property that we're on now, were areas where I just left them and let them root the whole area, essentially, until it was basically a dust bowl, which isn't always the case. Yeah, go ahead.
Do you use fencing that you move, like just
Yes.
electric, like those?
Yeah, so I use electric fencing. So basically what I've learned through the conventional way of raising them, because like I used to raise, when I first was raising pigs back when I was like 17, I was doing it on a farm that I was working at essentially, and I wasn't used to seeing the animals on pasture at all, right?
Yeah.
So again, we talk about the conventional way of farming, how, you know, we're gonna till the soil and we're gonna reseed and like work the way around this like sections of land that I used to work on. But then like I say, going through like university and then just with the new talks and new things that are coming up with regenerative agriculture and how we've been kind of doing things not necessarily the most efficiently. So yeah, like I say, I've been using electric fence. A single strand electric fence is what keeps all of my pigs in. Once they get used to it, they basically just have to get shocked by it once. When you first are testing them out to it, you basically want to be around to make sure that if they do get out, that you're there to put them back in.
Right.
Because sometimes all it takes is one pig to get out and the rest of them will start to follow. But yeah, like I say, through experience and mainly just the past couple of years, I've learned that electric fence is amazing. The only downfall is if you don't have an energy source, but you can get the solar electric fence little things, which Buckerfields does sell here. I have a couple of those and they work amazing, even like through winter if you needed them. But like say, the main problem that you're gonna have with electric fence is if the grass gets too tall. So you might have to move your electric fence to the inside so it doesn't short out, so that you have still enough shock essentially hitting them when they do touch it. So yeah, so I believed in closed loop nutrient cycling, and this is where I found raising numerous species on the land actually helps add to that. So raising chickens, you're gonna get the nitrogen level put back into the soil. And then usually if you I run my chickens with my pigs and they kind of become like this little symbiotic relationship. The chickens actually will sleep with the pigs, which is also good for if the pigs ever were to pick up any ticks or like mites, the chickens will just sit on their back and basically like back them up. So it's kind of good in that regard. Yeah, and I feel like that's one thing, again, I didn't really know, and I learned this through free ranging my animals. And it essentially came down to the property that I ended up purchasing after the wildfires. And I had to free range because I had nowhere to contain them essentially, aside from electric fence. And like as you can see in this picture here is my chickens and my chicken tractors. But when it came to like old enough for them, I basically lifted the chicken tractors up and I would only lock them in there at night to keep the predators away from them. So.
Are there specific breeds of chickens that are better?
So this is again another conversation that we're leading into, I guess. So right here I have the typical broilers that most of your hatcheries or the commercial growers are growing. Through discussion with other farmers in the region, we're learning that, well, there's, how do I even say? There's other birds, right? Like no different than the turkeys. We're raising the typical, like your white turkey that grows to a specific size. Whereas going back to more your heritage breeds are gonna have higher quality through the taste and the flavor of the meat that you're not gonna get with this broiler. So one bird that we're There's somebody, her name's Emily, and I think she's from Northern Hatchery. She does Mistral Gris. So Mistral Gris do take up to 12 weeks, whereas these are 6 to 8 weeks. You can push them to 8 weeks to get more poundage, but then you're going to look at more problems as you kind of go on, essentially, right? They could get heat stress. Basically, their bodies get oversized for their bone structure, and then they basically, which I never saw, but some people do see. So again, this is again the benefits of when you free range as opposed to containment, right? My animals get far more exercise. They're like run around, so they're building more muscle mass too, right? There's the debate whether or not if that causes a tougher meat or not, and some people were doing studies on that too, but I don't know. I think it all comes down to what you're feeding them and what type of plant-based material they're getting. Because, yeah, my chickens were pretty outstanding, and same with my turkeys, and I had numerous compliments from people saying that was the best turkey they have ever eaten. And you could see that in one of my first slides. My turkeys were in tall grass, but that was through the ability of moving them many times and to numerous different farms where there was a plentiful of grass where I had to kind of range them. So potential crops for foraging. So this is more specific to pigs. Again, so your legumes, alfalfa is definitely one of the more practical crops. And again, when it comes, this also will come down to what breed of pigs you're choosing to raise. So I'm raising a Kuni. I'm switching from your commercial breed, which would be your conventional landrace, Yorkshire kind of cross. And then there's also, again, there's Berkshire, there's Burdock, and like numerous other breeds of pigs, but like I'm focusing now more so on the Kunis, which is a New Zealand breed of pig. They take closer to 15 to 16 months to 2 years to finish. So, and what I've discovered with them is they need a very high nutrient level as opposed to just like grass. So with the Kunis, and like I say, I'm just venturing into them now and learning how to kind of manage them, is that through clover and alfalfa, I could basically cut them off of like any grain, and they can thrive on strictly like more like legumes and grasses essentially. But with that being said, because they are a smaller pig, they like their crops to be pretty short. So they're not going to eat like a really tall grass, like a brome grass, whereas your other breeds of pigs, they will take that down. So yeah, like I say, these are just a few of the recommended legumes and grasses for pigs, and the reasons why that fall behind that, like smooth brome grass, because it can help tolerate heavy grazing, and your orchard grass, because it can handle a lot of trampling and still grow quite well. So here's a short little video of what I would do on a daily on my farm, not on a daily, but every couple weeks, and that just for at the start of the season. So you can kind of see that it's early spring here. This would have been in April last year, and this kind of just gives you a bit of an idea of what happens, I guess.
How many acres do you have?
So I acquired 6 acres, and on that 6 acres is 1 acre and a third that is cleared. So this past year I ran 15 pigs, potentially on what would have been closer to, I want to say at least 4 acres. And that's one thing that you definitely need to consider. Again, I have a little bit of that talk further along here, is that you need to consider how much space they're going to use and how much they're going to forage and eat throughout that time. So it's kind of like an experiment. I found this for myself this past year, simply because was my first time raising them from piglets since I was a teenager. So this is frustrating.
Do you have to
You just restart your computer.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm a Mac user, so let me see. In India.
Yeah, well, just control option escape, right?
No, not on math.
If you do a Control
Control.
Delete, your task manager should come up, and you can choose to close that option.
Yeah, I don't know why.
Won't let you, it won't let you do anything right now.
Yeah, the only thing I-
Unless it ceased completely.
Can you chat?
Okay, we can chat. So, I'll just chat about a few other things that I don't have on here, actually. And if it doesn't, just I can look at the whole thing restart it.
Yeah, I was just thinking too hard, that's all.
But usually you can do command option to escape the whole program, right? And to force quit is what I would do and just restart.
On Mac? Try it.
Control.
But-
Escape.
No, I don't think so. Okay, I'll put it this if you want to come up front.
Okay. Yeah, so like I say, we can venture into talking about some good guides that you can use. So this is a book that was given to me in my first year. So Story's Guide to Raising Pigs. It has a lot of really good information, especially if you're starting out. It has examples of pig shelters, containment areas of how you're going to contain them. Again, I don't necessarily agree with this because I do mine in a not yet conventional way. So yeah, so it just talks about how for breeding and stuff like that, if you're looking at breeding and the selection of them, which again, I'm still kind of learning, even what to look for and what to select for my breeding stock. And then this has a quick touch base on the illnesses that you can see or that you might come across and kind of what you're going to use, I guess. Doesn't really come up with what you should use to treat them necessarily. But one thing I recommend is, there you go.
No, I
What?
wasn't. The last video was the microscope.
Anyways, so this is a dewormer, essentially for pigs. This one here, I recommend that you do it every 35 to 45 days. So basically it helps remove the parasites from the pigs, but it doesn't necessarily, it kind of like stuns them. It doesn't necessarily like kill them, it just like flushes them out. So that's again where it comes to moving your animals when you're worm them, and then I would then move them thereafter, right? So they're not on that same area kind of thing. So yeah, basically deworming you're gonna do if you're gonna get some pigs onto your farm within the first week to 10 days. The recommendation is to deworm them then, and then you can deworm them basically as you see fit throughout the time that you're growing them.
So is that common that pigs get worms?
So it is
often?
common for most animals to get parasites, right? So regardless if you're doing, like, I would say my experience would be more so with horses, because we raised horses and ponies growing up, and that was just a common thing that we would typically do, is deworm our animals a couple times a year. Like I say, with pigs, I think if you are, like I say, getting them from somebody else's farm, definitely a good idea, because you don't know what they're going to have within their soils or even within their herd. Now, with that being said, also, depending on what type of venture you wish to go on, if you're raising any animal for that, my recommendation is to basically raise everything from a baby and to keep a closed herd. And there's reasons for keeping a closed herd, because you are removing like a bit of the biosecurity around transporting and importing animals on and off your farm. So there's certain diseases, especially with pigs, that we don't see much anymore, but in the past there were. So like I say, I had my own experience this past year of acquiring some pigs from another producer. In the essence, we're like, oh, okay, like they're getting rid of their animals. This is like a good opportunity, and to learn from them, kind of thing. But what I found is that it kind of ended up taking me down a direction I didn't really want to go. Within 2 weeks of having these animals, I had an animal that was going down, not realizing what it was going down with. So then I had to make a conversation in the phone call saying, what do you have on your farm? And then speaking with other producers about some of the other, like one of the diseases is erysipelas, and it can remain within the soil for 7 years. So it's definitely not something you ever want to have on your farm. And the same thing with chickens is coccidia. So chickens can get coccidia just from other birds flying over, or again, it can just come from even you're just wearing your boots on someone else's farm and hey, let's go check out your chickens, then go home and wear your same boots and not clean them kind of thing, or sterilize them. So like I say, that's kind of one thing I discovered, is know your producer essentially and know what they're vaccinating for, know if they have any existing diseases on their farm and what their farm was previously used for if they're new to that area of land also.
Can I just want to, coccidia actually is a parasite issue,
Yeah. So
not a disease.
That's true.
So, and it's actually a management issue.
Yeah.
All chickens, even newborn chicks, have
Yeah.
coccidiosis within their system.
And a way to treat that is with vinegar, apple cider vinegar, I think it is.
Some people say you
Yeah,
can treat
you
it
can-
that way.
You can put that in the water right from when they're babies.
The best option is usually just to keep them from having an outbreak in the first place.
Yeah. But with that being said, I lost probably 50 chickens without even knowing what I had. And I was a week away from my processing date. I moved my processing date and I started losing animals like flies, not realizing that if I would have known to look for blood in the stool. So again, knowing your common signs and symptoms, and what to kind of look for if you start seeing a problem. For me, I thought it was just that it was the temperature, because the temperatures were drastically changing at that time, and the humidity of my animals was they're super temperamental, and yeah.
Prime environment for growth of coccidia.
Yeah. So, and like I say, a hard learning curve, but then at the end of the day, all I did is I took them in for processing, and my processor basically told me, she's like, you had coccidia. She's like, I'm so sorry. I'm like, oh my gosh. So.
Did they have to condemn them?
No, because it wasn't throughout all of them, but there has to be 3 things wrong. Basically when you're processing your animals, and your third strike is the ones that get done. So, but yeah, so, because there was nothing obviously wrong within the meat itself, but yeah, so like I say, here you can kind of see one of the pastures I was in, and like I say, I discovered that again, free ranging is totally possible when you have perimeter fencing. These animals will not go very far from their feed source or their water source. You can see up here I had a containment area. This is where I would lock all of the turkeys up at night. And in here is where I'd lock up my chickens. So I had both my chickens and my turkeys free ranging together. And over here would be the perimeter fence.
And what's a good type of fence other than electric, or is electric really the best?
Page wire. So you're gonna want to have page wire if you can afford to put up a perimeter fence in page wire. Definitely it helps keep out all your predators. And we've definitely found that even if you're unable to get it up everywhere, it'll help deter coyotes and stuff from coming all the way in. We've lost numerous chickens, that have been laying eggs in the bush kind of thing, and then they'll come out with 12 little babies kind of thing. So yeah, definitely if you can put up a perimeter fence with page wire, I'd highly recommend it. And then when you're putting up your electric fence, you put up your electric fence along either the top or the bottom. So if you're doing other animals, high tensile electric works really well. And then from that, I kind of clamped down to where I would put in my push-in posts for my pigs and make sure that I'm at least a foot away, because the pigs will root, depending again what breed you do. the pigs will root and eat right up to that fence line, essentially, your electric fence.
So put it, like you said, put it
At
front.
least a couple feet away, so
Oh.
that you, if you ever have to harrow or like smooth out your fields, that you're able to do that with an implement or a piece of equipment without like ripping your fence out, essentially. So, yeah, so there's the moving the animals part. So basically what I did in this film is basically I have my containment area here. So again, what I use is pig panels. Pig panels are super amazing for keeping pigs in, essentially as long as they're not trying to like get out or break free, because they can tear it right down and jump right over it. But I used T-posts to push in my my pig panels, and then again it made it easier for me to remove them and then move the pigs around and move that pen wherever I wanted to for a more permanent location.
So are you referring to welded wire
Yeah.
log panels?
Yeah, and they're basically about, I want to say 3.5 feet tall, probably closer to
16.
25, 16 feet? 16 feet, yeah, you're right. Okay, so why should everybody raise a pig is my thoughts. Basically because you can have basically zero waste from your kitchen, aside from your meat scraps and stuff. I don't believe in feeding my animals meat products, especially my pigs, so I don't do that. But like I say, you can still keep those bones that you're using from whatever your meat, and I have a neighbor who puts her bones in a bag and she takes a sledgehammer to them and beats them into smithereens and makes her own bone meal. So again, there's another use for the bones that are coming from your kitchen. So also gleaning and cleaning around fruit trees. A lot of the produce or fruit that I got in the fall, which is what I finished my pigs on, I basically got from all of my neighbors' trees. I would just go and knock on their door, I would see a tree with tons of fruit below it and said, would you be interested, or may I like clean up your apples underneath your tree? They were delighted and overly excited because not only did their yard get cleaned, but it also stops the bears and other animals from coming into the yard. And again, a free source of food. So wherever you can kind of source that is even better. There's something that I'm just learning about now. It's called the Loop program, which is where your local grocers and stuff like that are distributing the waste through farmers through this Loop program. So you sign up onto that and it guarantees the grocery store essentially, or that you are a farmer and that you're using this waste to feed your animals, because it's not meant obviously for human consumption at that point. Again, pigs are really great for working any field that you want to have worked up, and essentially for gardens I think they're perfect because you can contain them in there, you know, throw some stuff down if it's not already the leftovers from last year, and they'll root up your entire garden. Another plant or crop that we were looking at using is a neighbor of ours had Jerusalem artichokes, a huge amount of Jerusalem artichokes. Now we were going to do a bit of an experiment with that and to see about basically just letting the pigs go on that, and again looking at how we can save on our feed costs by feeding them that. But in my opinion, by feeding them a strict diet like that is going to change the flavor of the meat again, right? So I think dealing with something like that, you need to be a little bit careful and just be willing to do an experiment, essentially.
They make humans really gassy, so you'd
Yeah.
wonder if they would be creating a
With-
lot of indigestion.
For the big pigs, yeah.
For the pigs.
Yeah. So what are some of the major aspects that some of you might think that you might want to think about before venturing into raising pigs? Or any animal for that matter?
Your neighbors?
What's that?
Your neighbors?
Yes, your neighbors is definitely one of them that I didn't even think about, but that's definitely one. I know I made my neighbors very nervous with my animals when I didn't have a perimeter fence on my farm. And they started to put up a perimeter fence for us. So that was advantageous for both of us. But for me, it's time. So it's the daily commitment, day in, 365 days of the year, and being able to get off your farm. So again, this comes down to having really good neighbors and friends who are interested in taking care of your animals when you want to go away for a couple of days. So yeah, because I believe in not free feeding. So I guess this is a good place to touch on that, is that there's some people who will free feed their pigs. Now that's just dumping all of your feed into one big trough and letting them free range. So my first year I was able to do this, and I was didn't really know if I should, but the previous owner of these animals was free feeding and I wasn't. And there's controversy or discussion around the switching back and forth and how that's bad for your animal and how it will cause them to gain more fat. So with my first processing, my butcher basically said these animals are too fat. So I didn't free feed in my second year, and I'll show you a daily feed chart that I use to raising them essentially, and what that means essentially. But yeah, so free feeding will just cause your animal to get super fat, and you're gonna probably lose a little bit of money because it's just not as efficient. So some of the key components to raising pigs sustainably, I would think, is ample space for your crop rotations. So like I said, I did mine on probably 4 to 6 acres from piglet to finish, and by the very end, I found I was running out of space as my pigs were nearing their processing dates. And again, it's staggering your processing dates also, right? It's something you're gonna wanna do if you're gonna want to raise more than just a few. And again, infrastructure, so you're gonna need pig shelters to keep them cool from the daytime sun, essentially, and in the winter to keep them out of the draft of the winter freeze. And obviously a good water supply and areas for cooling. So again, depending on what kind of animal or what size of pig you choose to raise, like I say, the kunis are much smaller than a conventional pig. So with the kunis, you can use a small kiddie pool for them to go into, as opposed to filling up a big pool of water on the ground. And like I say, on our area where we're at right now, we have free-flowing water, or creeks that run all year round. So what we've done is gravity fed probably 350 feet up the field, and we put in a little screen with probably 1.5 inch little pipe all the way down to the field, and that gives us fresh water basically all the time. So in the summer, we were also able to basically run water like up into the air that would just flow through the entire field, and gave my larger group of pigs a whole area where they could wallow and basically get full of mud so they don't get sunburned. Okay, so some of the things that you are going to want to consider having or purchasing prior to getting started. So I really believe in solar, or the solar electric fencer, because it works amazingly well. And if you only plan on just raising 1 or 2 pigs for your own self-consumption, then you don't really have to worry about the winter time because they'll be processed by that. So some push-in posts also. You're going to need a stranded electric wire and a reel. So one thing I learned this year is that you can have a whole tote full of electric wire that you're just going to have bundled up as you're continually putting it up and taking it down. But they do sell these really beautiful reels in the store here, and it makes it super easy, and you can do like kilometers of fencing like pretty quickly. So I found that saved a lot of time. And again, you're going to want to put in the least amount of time. Well, not the least amount of time, but you're going to want to like use your time wisely, essentially, or you'll find your whole summer will be gone and you haven't done much besides move your animals around. So yeah, so again, you're going to need feed troughs and water troughs, kiddie pools for like smaller pigs, it works wonderful, and then storage for feed. You need to think about rodents, rats, and which have just come into the region, and mice. So rats are a really awful problem that we've experienced this year. And so I've been putting all of my feed in old freezers. You can also get the big plastic bins from any one of your local dairies. They go through a lot of like cleaning solutions and like chemicals using to wash down the tanks. So they'll have these big totes of like round barrels that you can get from them. And we also use those to store feed and just cover them with a piece of plywood. Pig panels are super efficient. Like I say, with the T-post, put those up. and it allows you to have also like a portable area, and then the portable fencing panels. So they're like a black fencing panel. I'm sure Barkerfields has them. And they make really good like little pens when you need to put something up really quick. If you're moving your animals or to a new location, like say I had them when I was going through the wildfire season, and I moved all my animals 3 times. So having portable equipment like that was really advantageous at that time.
So how often do you move them? Every couple weeks, did you say?
So like with the portable, like those pens, I wouldn't really, like the ones with my, like the fencing panels, I would leave those up. But with the electric wire, I would basically move them close to every 10 days to 2 weeks, depending on the size of area that you give them. Now, the smaller area that you give them, you're gonna have more efficiency by moving them more often, right? Because then you can monitor and control what they're eating and what they're consuming. So you can put them in one area, and as soon as it gets down to a certain level, then you're gonna be wanting to move them again. Again, having like the reels for electric fence, like you're definitely gonna wanna invest in one of those if you're gonna get any amount of pigs and you wanna do a large amount of, like a large area, because then you can quickly put up and take down your fence, and you can put up fence while you still have them contained. So sometimes having 2 reels is what I would do. Have 2 reels connected to the same fence, and then I would kind of like, say if you had like a circle that an area that you were using, or a rectangular area or a square area, right? You're gonna mark that off into 4 sections. You're gonna move them around in like, so that you're constantly being efficient. Like you can keep this one up, and then you can string that up, and then take that one down last, and then let them all in, and close them off from that space. Yeah.
So if you have lots of money, can you just have more electric wire and just have more
Yes.
sections already made, and
Yeah.
you just electrify whichever section
Yeah.
you want them in?
Yeah, like I say, it's all depends on how much you really want to spend. One thing you will find is that with the electric fence, the pigs will not move necessarily into the new zone right away. You might not even be able to get them in the first day or the second day. Mostly they'll move within a day, but there's always 1 or 2 that are super hesitant. It could be because they've been shocked numerous times. Even when you take down that piece of wire, they still see that as a barrier, even though the wire is completely gone. So that's one thing I noticed as a bit of a challenge when I was really trying to get some of them moved and separating my groups. Because as my animals got older, I would separate them into groups and size, right? Because these ones are like a little bit more dominant on the trough. You're going to want to pull those ones away at a certain time, because they're just going to keep growing. The other ones are still going to be a little bit more stunted. So yeah, I'm a true believer in using what, yep, go ahead.
I was just gonna ask, do you farrow in pasture?
So I pastured my sows last year, prior to farrowing, so yes. And I did farrow them in a pasture. In winter, 100% no. You're gonna want those animals inside. They need to be under a heat lamp right away. Even when I was doing it in the spring, it was still too cold. So I still had to use a heat lamp on those animals for at least a week to 2 weeks, until they're big enough where they can, keep themselves warm enough, essentially.
What is farrowing?
It's the birthing. We're getting right into it. The next slide.
I'll let you keep going then.
Yeah. So,
I
like I
jumped
say,
the gun.
I'm a strong believer in using what you have. So this here is at the time when I didn't have any shelters made. I was using my stock trailer for their pen. So not only was I able to move my animals around if I needed to from one location on the farm to another one, which I did do with these guys, but then you can see how they really function the best in groups, right? So they keep each other warm at night, and they cuddle together. Like, it's pretty amazing. So like I say, this is the Kuni breed that I have, and then these are my landrace Yorkshire crossed with the Mulefoot. So yeah, we'll get on to the topic of farrowing. So farrowing is the birthing of your sow. So if you overwinter or decide to breed any sows, then you can farrow them out. So there's certain things to take into consideration when, obviously, when you're venturing onto that side, and that is having the proper shelter for them, and making sure that you have heat lamps set up, And within that area of containment where you're gonna have that sow farrow, you need to have an area where the piglets can get away from the sow and get underneath the heat lamp. And this is a really, I can say I learned from my own mistakes too. I knew what to do, and then sometimes things happen and you don't have the time. When a sow has piglets on you and you're not expecting her to have piglets, which happened to me this past November, I was looking at my sow being like, this sow is bred. She's getting milk. But there was a part of me going like, she wasn't bred from the farm I brought her from, because she would have farrowed, because they're 3 months, 3 weeks, 3 days. So again, looking at your calendar, knowing when that sow was bred. With pigs, I myself personally think it's extremely important that you're there for when they're farrowing. These sows will accidentally lay on their piglets. The piglets could potentially get out of the pen that you have them in, which happened to me, and I had significant losses. So I basically lost almost an entire litter because one, it was too cold. The temperature had just started to drop and I didn't realize the night before. So basically there's signs. Certain, again, dealing with different breeds, not knowing what each sow is gonna do. So nesting is one thing the sows will do. So on my farm here, basically the sows would go out into the bush because I had them where they could access like the trees. She started ripping parts of the shrubs down and bringing them into the pen. So for me, that was a clear sign that this sow is gonna farrow today, right? So, and then it's again, watching your sow, and pigs typically like to farrow in the middle of the night. So it makes it super inconvenient. I've never seen them farrow yet during the day. And like I say, a farrow can take anywhere from 6 to 7 hours. And just being there to make sure that when she gets up, because she'll get up and she'll roll over, because they've basically got sacks on either side where they have their babies. And yeah, so she'll get up and roll over and then have the other side. And sometimes she'll get up a couple times. And that's when you have the chances of losing them. And again, depending on how good of a sow you have. And that's why you need to be really selective with who you're choosing to breed. And again, looking for those traits and making sure they're calm and friendly. The sows that I had that are in this picture were ones that I had raised since they were little. So they were used to me. I'd rub their bellies as they're growing up. They'd flop over in the field. I'm like, I'm gonna keep that one to breed, you know? So I just kind of went more for temperament at that time because sows can be extremely vicious, no different than any other animal. So again, making sure that when you do have like a farrowing pen, that you have a spot to escape from.
So do you have a male then, or how do you do that?
I did have a male at the time because I had acquired it from these people that I purchased the animals from. So.
And then you got like, because you can't keep all these males, right? Or how do
Yeah, no, you only would keep one.
then you got her pregnant.
Yeah, and I kind of was watching for their signs of when they were coming into heat. They typically will come into heat every 21 days, and you'll have a window from 3 to 5 days to get them bred.
So then do you, from now on, would you get one, like do you rent one, or how do you?
So with what I have now, I've got 2 boars, and one came from the same farm. So when I bought my initial breeding stock, I bought them for breeding, and then I'd say the other ones I acquired.
So then just keep them separate.
Yeah, and it's a matter of making sure that you're like, because I'm doing purebred stock now, like so I can register all of the animals that I'm farrowing. So that comes with a higher cost, but then again, you gotta keep the genetics like distinct. So you have to keep track of that, and then I have to report that to get like my registration for each one of those animals that I so choose to sell as registered stock. So.
Yeah, because I do that with goats.
Okay.
So I go back to where I got them from, and then she has the purebred male.
Yeah.
And then that way I don't have to keep one.
Yeah, so see if you can find somebody that will do that with you, and again, it's knowing your breeder and knowing the people that you're doing business with, right? Because you're gonna create a really close relationship with them, and there's a huge level of trust that goes along with that, right? So, so yeah, again, I didn't really touch base on all these things. Some of the things that you need to do with piglets is you need to clip their needle teeth. So the needle teeth are they're sets of teeth that are initially, they will fall out naturally on their own, but they'll scrap with each other when they're piglets, and they'll kind of rip, like they'll bite each other's ears, and then they'll eventually start to kind of tear at the teats of the sow, which is definitely something you don't want. So it's just like more of a health thing too, that goes along for the sows, and just the piglets not injuring each other and trying to like bite each other.
How do you clip their teeth?
So there are some special, I didn't bring them with me, little pliers that work. They're kind of as a curve to them that you can kind of put in, and then just you put them on their back and you put it in. So yeah, it's
Just as far as you can, or?
you don't go as far as you can because you don't want them to bleed too much. You basically just have to take the tip off.
Okay.
So, and then it just kind of stops them from, like I said, being able to fight with each other and like mark each other up essentially and show blood and that kind of thing. So, also castrating should be done within the first couple weeks. Some people do it right away. I don't think, like, it's pretty difficult to castrate a little wee pig when its testicles are extremely small. So I like to give them a couple weeks. And even that being said, I did my 2 batches last year at the same time. So I had some that were 2 weeks and I had some that were 5 weeks. The ones that were 5 weeks old were a little bit harder to do because, again, they're a little bit stronger to hold. So again, it's just kind of learning what you're doing. But if you're gonna raise breeding stock, again, some of the reading that I was doing is that you wait till 10 weeks because it'll take you a while to kind of decide which ones are going to be your best performers, I guess. And you also give them a shot of iron while doing that too, because the sow doesn't create enough iron in her milk, so that's just as a supplement to stop them getting anemia. So.
For people that don't know, what's the reasoning behind castrating a male pig?
Oh, so the hormones that a male pig will produce once it comes into maturity is basically what you're trying to veer away from. So these hormones, they're very distinct, and it creates a flavor in the meat that is unpalatable. There are meats in your store that you will buy, and I can tell you if somebody's cooking a piece of meat from a store and that meat has not been castrated or something's gone wrong, I can smell it as soon as somebody's cooking it, and there's a percentage of people that can smell it and taste it, but it's the taste and that tainting of the meat that is like, it's absolutely disgusting. To me, it tastes like you're eating, like it tastes like the barnyard to me, essentially. So that's how I would kind of describe it. The smell of a boar, when the sows are meat and he's breeding her, that's what it tastes like. So, yeah.
It's called boar taint.
Boar taint, yeah.
And not everybody has the gene to actually detect it though.
Yeah, so that's one thing I discovered too, is like not everybody can, and I'm just like, well, thank God I'm sensitive to it. Because, like, yeah, like
And
say.
then are you using a band?
No, so what you actually do, I was gonna, if anybody wants to come for a demonstration, I have a piglet that needs to be castrated. So basically what you do, you get somebody to hold the pig on its back, and then the testicles of the pig are like more on the back, like the back side of them. So anyways, you just hold them and then you squeeze it, and you could take an X-Acto knife, like a clean X-Acto knife, just do a slight little slit on the upper skin into the, I want to say the like epidermis layer, and then basically you can squeeze it and the testicle will pop out. And then what you do, all you do is you just grab a hold of the testicle and you literally just rip it out. So, and it rips it out like really far back, and it should have like a little coil, like it kind of like creates a little coil on the end of it.
Wow.
So, like I say, the older they get, the harder you have to pull, and it makes, I want to say it's pretty painless, like it's going to hurt them a little bit, but it's pretty painless after the fact. Afterwards, you'll just spray it with iodine, and they heal up within a couple days, right? They don't even really notice it. Like,
Oh, so you don't have to stitch it up or
no, God no. So basically, it is a little open wound, but like I say, it heals up super fast. You just put a little bit of iodine on it, and it does quite well. So here's another little video, but we won't play it because it's it's a minute too. We can go back to it to see if it'll play later. But yeah. So again, you don't have the means to, say, build like structures and stuff on your place. I was in a bit of a hurry when I moved my animals to my place, so I used pallets. I used pallets and I stuffed them full of straw, and then, or hay, and then I covered it with plastic wrap to stop the draft from coming in. And at the very back side of that is where I had my heat lamp, kind of cordoned off where the sow couldn't get to the piglets. And like I said, you need to have enough room so that that sow can basically flip and she can turn around inside that pen. So again, it all comes down to size of your animal at the end of the day. But yeah, so, and again, making sure that all your piglets are getting like their first feed, so they're getting the colostrum that they need to thrive. So, and this sow, she had 17 piglets, and she only had like 16 or 15 teats. So at the end of it, she had just enough teats for all of the piglets that she farrowed. So, and that's an important thing when you're looking for a sow, is to make sure she's got a sufficient amount of teats at the end of the day. So yeah.
I was just going to ask, when you're pasture farrowing, do you find it more difficult to then catch the piglets that need castration?
Yes. It was very difficult. So I ended up having to chase some of them around, which wasn't really good, and that can take a really long time when you have one little pig running all over the place. And you got to be careful not to stress them either, right? So
or anger mom.
Yeah, my moms, they were pretty okay. So what I had done is whenever, like, I went and caught them after they had fed, essentially, and then what I did, I actually took a piece of plywood to kind of like close it off to let myself go in there and catch a few at a time. It's definitely advantageous to have some help when doing some of these things, because yeah, you definitely don't want to be trying to do that by yourself. So.
I was just going to ask if you had any tips for that.
Yeah, like I say, you can block them off, make sure the sow is not there. And then, like I say, you definitely don't want to be castrating them anywhere near the sow either. So I used my stock trailer for many things. I even castrated inside of my stock trailer. I sat down with a chair and a bucket, and like, or two chairs, and one of us held them, the other one kind of did the deed. So.
Yeah, we have larger breed than you do, so
yeah.
We actually use our trailer to put mom in.
Okay, smart.
While we're catching piglets,
Yeah.
and then we take them away.
Yeah.
Then we take them back when we're done and let them out.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, which is good.
Yeah.
So, yeah, like I say, it's when they start squealing, it's like, they're gonna squeal a little bit, obviously, when you're pulling their testicle out. So definitely a good thing to wear your earplugs, because, yeah. But like I say, it's pretty quick, and like it is a little bit painful, obviously, for them, but it is actually really quite quick to do. So, another thing I wanted to touch base on is premise ID and your pig trace and herd mark numbers. So basically, any farmer raising any animals has to have a premise ID number. It's basically, I want to say, the government's way of informing farmers and producers when there is natural disaster or disease outbreaks. So one good thing, or not one good thing, one thing you can mention to that is the avian flu. When it hit our region, basically I was getting an email, like I was receiving emails, and if it is close to your farm, you'll probably even get a phone call. So yeah, it's basically what you need to have if you're raising any animals. And like I say, it also goes along with when it comes to slaughtering and processing. You're going to need that pig trace ID. What plot of land? Because it puts that number to your land, your title essentially, and where you're raising them. So yeah. So then, like with that being said, also for pigs, there's the pig trace ID. So that's for transporting and buying and selling animals. So if you're ever buying an animal from a producer, they should already be pre-tagged, and then again, if anything ever was to go wrong with that animal, it's so that they can trace back where that pig has been, and there's a record, basically a record keeping of where that animal's been sold through its period of its life and who it's been transferred to. So it's again a really good way of like being able to track where diseases and stuff might come from at the end of the day. So it's more for just your own, it's more for the health around animals, I guess. Yeah, so, and just basically basic tracking of them, which you don't need to do if you're doing your own raising and slaughtering on farm, right? But you would need a herd mark number. So again, when you're taking your animal to your local slaughtering plant, and it basically has to have either the herd mark number you can put on its back, you can spray paint it on, just as like an ID so that they know which animals or who's basically being run through the slaughterhouse, or an ear tag again with that in it. So, and those are just the basic requirements when it comes to processing your animal. So expected costs. Basically, you're going to look at the initial purchase of your animal, how much that's going to cost you, your feed costs overall. Your transportation costs can sometimes run as a very unexpected cost. For me, it was a huge loss and a substantial amount of money when I had to move my farm 3 times. So, like I said, these are unexpected costs that you need to be able to, like, obviously endure, or you're going to end up with significant, like, you're still going to end up with losses, but you might have to find other avenues to probably disperse your animals if you can't afford to move them, right? And again, processing fees. Processing fees are one of the largest fees that we have to, that we face. And essentially, you're seeing a lot of people doing Farm Gate Plus licenses on their farm where they can slaughter on farm. And again, a lot of people are setting up their own butchers on their farms, which is amazing because the processing capacity is a total bottleneck with almost all animals, it seems. With beef, you have to book almost a year to a year and a half in advance. With pigs, you better damn well know who you're going to be getting to process them, and also have alternative avenues of where you can take your animals. Rocana shutting down for all of the pig producers and the producers in our region was a huge hurdle for us to try to get over, and ways of looking at how they're going to dispose of these animals. And again, like how far are you willing to travel with your animal to get it processed? For us, it was a 4-hour drive to the coast to get our animals processed, essentially. Or you venture on to on-farm slaughter, right? So there are avenues around having, I want to say, there's a way of selling your animal to your client. So if Maria wanted to buy an animal from me, I could basically sell her the share in that animal, or I could sell her my animal prior to it being slaughtered, and then Maria could be a part of the processing of that animal, where she would be the one that makes the decisions as to how it's getting slaughtered and what's being done with it from that point forward. But I've already sold my animal to her, so it's now in her hands. But then I can do as she asks to have it processed. And I did have numerous clients of mine that came directly to my farm, not only to see how my animals were being raised. I had numerous people who wanted to come and see that, and I welcomed them to my farm. But also, I processed some of my own meat that we were consuming for ourselves. I was processing and slaughtering myself, and I also had customers of mine that recommended and asked to be there for the processing of their own animal also, and they wanted it to be done on farm as opposed to being shipped away and getting done, because again, it causes more stress on the animal, which I find is extreme. Like it's pretty inhumane when it comes down to it. So yeah, like I say, if you can venture into getting your animals processed to the closest facility that you can, where possible, if you're going to end up selling it to just the general public. So yeah, so daily feed rations. So basically, this is a feed chart that I kind of started with, and I find it works very efficiently because I did not overfeed my animals, and I can tell you my butcher was so happy with me this year, and I was so proud because every 2 weeks, and essentially every week, you can slowly up their feed. Again, I was raising mine in larger groups, so I would weigh out one container and then kind of pile it all together and make sure that I was feeding them both sufficient amounts in the morning and in the evening. And again, this is where not free feeding makes a huge difference, right? So you're able to control their daily consumption. My animals were also on pasture and free range on quite a large area. So not containing your animals as much, they're going to probably need a little bit more feed, but because I had mine on pasture, they were being supplemented with that also. So there's the debate as to whether or not my animals were gaining as much weight as they should have been, but at the same time, I felt that I was raising them in the most ethical way possible, and my happy meat, you know, makes like delicious, nutritious meat to eat. So
So the grain is a supplement.
So the
with your
grain,
pasture.
the pasture was a supplement to the grain. So I still fed them their daily requirements. Like this would be their daily requirements for grain up to
Right.
22 weeks. And anything after 22 weeks, you're going to consistently feed them. Basically, it's just below 6 pounds a day. It can be anywhere from 4.5 to 4.8 pounds per day per pig. So, and then, like I say, you're going to look at the overall days to finish your pig, right? So these are things that you probably would want to know prior to getting into finish it. We can talk hard numbers if you guys would like, as to, this is basically 600 to 700 pounds of feed if you're starting at 30 to 60 pounds of a feeder pig. Now, if you're getting a weaner pig, you're gonna end up spending, you're gonna need a little bit more poundage here, right? So that's gonna, again, change a little bit of your cost. But again, to buy a feeder pig, or a weaner pig, they're quite expensive these days. Back in the day when I was selling a feeder pig close to 20, I don't even know how many years, like probably 19 years ago, I was selling a feeder pig at $65 to $80. They're now running $150 to $175. So substantial difference. Our feed costs, I can give you the difference between 2021 and 2022. A ton of feed, which is 2,000 pounds, was $530, which would basically almost feed almost 3 pigs. It was 530 in my first year, and just this year it went to 840. So we saw a 65% increase in our feed costs, which makes you, again, you're gonna want to look at how can I supplement this animal's feed and still have them grow sufficiently with cutting down their costs in grain. I have neighbors who get scraps from a local grocer, all their outdated yogurt, milk, you name it. It takes her longer to finish her pigs, but she still finishes her pigs within a year, like I say, and she's spending almost nothing on feed. So, and again, right, you're gonna wanna weigh the pros and cons and making sure that they're still getting the right minerals amounts and stuff like that, and hence why going with a typical grower that your feed stores are already putting together, they're gonna have all the supplementary nutrients that they're gonna need within that feed. So yeah, and like I say, the ratio for a pig is 3 to 1, so every 3 pounds of feed, you're gonna get 1 pound of gain. And once they hit the threshold around 240 to 250 pounds is when that threshold changes drastically. So you're gonna end up feeding your pig, it's a 5 to 1 ratio. So you're gonna feed them 5 pounds of feed to get 1 pound of gain. So again, through experience, I was able to speak to other producers who raise their pigs closer to 300. It's just not as efficient to raise them to those weights, hence why we butcher them at 220 to 240 pounds. Is kind of where, as the happy medium is where I like to butcher. Because you're gonna have a fat content that's gonna be like just right on your bacon and stuff like that. Anything over that, you could potentially be heading into just, again, more fat content and not as much meat to bone ratio. Parasite control and deworming, we kind of touched on that a little bit. So yeah, new animals to the farm, sows, you're gonna want to do every 2 to 4 weeks before farrowing, and then your piglets, basically 6 to 8 weeks. And then you can continue, depending on what type of dewormer you're using. I used this last year. I found it really hard to use on a large group. They also make a pelleted dewormer. It's quite a bit more expensive, I think, but I think it's a way of actually making sure that each animal is getting the right amount when you actually can separate them or feed them in separate troughs. So, checking the weight of your pig. So here is a pig weight tape. So what you're gonna do to basically check the weight of your pig is you're gonna measure the heart girth. Now there's a formula that is the heart girth times the heart girth twice, and then you times that by the body length, and then you divide that by 400 is you're going to get your weight in pounds. It's said that if your pig is under 140 pounds, or anywhere, under 140 pounds, that you're going to add 7 pounds to that. Yeah, I found it worked really quite well. So basically, just behind the legs is where you're going to wrap this tape around. You're going to measure that heart girth, and then you're going to measure from the back of the ears to basically the tail. So, like I say, you need to have a pig that will stand for you and not move around, or this will not work. So you'll just be using your eyes, essentially, and just knowing the weights of your animals. Or you can put them on a scale, which I don't have, and that would be a lot harder to. But, yeah. So, processing, like we kind of touched base on. So for personal use, I would recommend 100% on-farm slaughter. There are numerous people out there through this past year that I have met, and that we've, people that have gone over and above and out of their way to help farmers that were strapped and stranded. Yeah, it's again, just knowing the people in your community and getting to know your neighbors. Obviously, if you're going to raise animals, it's really advantageous to know who else is raising those same animals. You know, so if you ever run into problems, what can we discuss and talk about? And hey, I had a problem with this. Have you ever seen this before? You know what I mean? It's a really good way to mitigate a lot of the things that you might come across. So yeah, like I say, if you're selling to the public, it has to be inspected at a government facility. You also have to carry an insurance policy. So again, we're talking costs, unexpected costs that you wouldn't ever expect. And again, so as the cost goes up, your value, your take home is less. So you really have to look at how you're valuing your time, and it's all again time in. And again, booking your butcher in advance is extremely important. I run into my issue when I got my first 7 pigs before I went onto this venture of taking over this farm business, was I couldn't find anywhere to process the 7 pigs that I had just purchased and got onto my farm. Everywhere was fully booked because I was a couple months into the season. So like I said, huge learning curve, and again, building relationships when you have relationships with your local butchers, and again, keep it as local as possible. That's all I can recommend, and build relationships with the people that you're doing business with, because at the end of the day, it can result in, if you have an emergency, they'll process your animal for you. So, and I've had that happen where I had a crazy sow and I couldn't move her. I moved her and she was basically ready to jump out of the trailer as I was driving down the road, and I had to pull into a farm where I knew there was concrete barriers and asked if they could house my animal until I could get this animal slaughtered. So, like I say, again, knowing your animals is key. Buying them from other people isn't always the best. So again, like I say, preparing for transport. Stock trailers are great. What you can do is you feed your animals inside your stock trailer. You get them used to this environment, and it's like home, right? That's where they're gonna get fed every day. So when it does come the day where you have to ship them and haul them away, they'll easily jump into that stock trailer the morning of, because there's nothing that you don't want is your animal getting out or not getting into that trailer when you're on a time crunch to get them in there. Unless you have a large enough stock trailer that you can keep them in overnight. And then again, I usually don't feed my animals on the last day prior to slaughter, and I think that just comes with raising chickens, because you're not supposed to feed your chickens 24 hours prior to them being processed. So like I say, know your partners. So your processors, your butchers, they're my partners in business, and I built such amazing relationships with both Victor and Veronica from Seattle's Old Fashioned Butcher, and Bill and Tanya from Spring Valley, that like it was pretty amazing. Like as we even went through the wildfires together, having the conversations, and I had to haul my chickens 2 hours to get them processed at Nancy McKay's in Vernon. So again, like I say, and it's all of these processors working together as like a group of people and looking out for everybody's best interest. So like I say, when it comes to the pricing of your product, it's definitely important to make sure that you pay yourself for your time. Now, as a farmer and somebody who grew up farming, I typically wouldn't take any money for the time in that I would ever put onto my animals. So when it came to the pricing of my product, I had to look at not my competitors, but my co-opetition, which would be Askew's and other producers within the region, like Chelsea and James Keenan. They're one of the producers that are processing pigs. So like I say, I looked at everybody as my partners, not as my competition, because that's just, I feel it puts a negative connotation on it, and we're all here to raise food for people, and I think we all have the same values in place when it comes down to it. So what I mean by that, with your people that you're working with and other producers, is you don't want to undercut them, right? I think it's I would frown upon it myself, and I would never do it to somebody else. I wouldn't sell my product for much less than what they're going to sell theirs for, right? But then you also have to look at quality of meat, right? We can look at Fresh Valley Farms. They're 100% organic, right? So when it comes to my animals aren't organically fed, but they're basically organic when it comes to them being pastured and free range. So I look at that in a little bit of comparison, and how can I then value my product in comparison to that, but knowing that mine isn't 100% organic. So yeah, like I say, definitely looking at as everybody in the region as more partners, and your co-opetition, because we cooperate together. So the benefits from your sales, basically, if you own a farm or any small chunk of land, you can basically apply for farm status. So basically, the minimum amount of sales, this is kind of changing. As we look at larger scale properties, you have to be able to create a certain amount of revenue to then classify to get farm status. Farm status basically just drops your property taxes to nothing. So it's really advantageous if you are farming on your property that you look into getting farm status right away. And the application deadline is usually by October 31st. So every year you have to continually apply. And these are, again, things that I've just learned. And because my mom and we've always had farm status on our farm kind of thing. With that being said, I want to talk a little bit about economies of scale. So if you were ever to look at making a substantial profit and kind of not really be a hobby farmer, even at the numbers that I was doing, I would still classify myself as a hobby farmer, because at the 650, the 100 turkeys and the 21 some odd pigs, I basically am not able to make a living off of that, right? So you have to look at a supplementary income, unless you have a partner that is obviously paying those bills, and you can be the stay-at-home farmer that's gonna like just grow the veggies and all the food for the family. Then that's wonderful. But yeah, yeah. So this was a hard reality that I actually discovered, because I ventured into this, and I'm telling you, I put a substantial amount of money, and like 50 grand goes really quickly. Even 100 grand will go like that once you buy equipment, once you buy all the equipment that you're gonna need for whatever animals that you're gonna produce. So like I say, if you're wanting to be in a certain market and creating a certain amount of revenue, it all comes down to numbers and your efficiency on how you're working your farm and your animals and moving them across your land. So using as much as you can to create as little waste as possible. So what I've discovered is that through having a dog, I'm able to save a lot of my waste. There's basically nothing that goes to waste. My dog will eat all of my scraps and my bones. And after, like I say, you have your primary cuts, the whole head can be used for head cheese. I haven't ventured into doing that quite myself yet, because when you have a lot going on, there's only so much you can kind of do. But there are people out there that will purchase the whole head from you, and there's numerous things that you can use, like the jowls. This year I actually took the jowls up, and I ended up getting them smoked and cured. So it's similar to bacon. has a bit of a different texture for sure. But yeah, it can basically be used as bacon. And like I said, there's numerous uses. Like the ears, they say you can like eat them, but I would just probably dehydrate them and feed them to my dog, right? Make dog treats. Same thing with the liver. We did eat some of the liver when it was fresh. It was super amazing. I had one of my clients that wanted the liver, and there's this sac that's in the inside around some of the organs, and basically his mother would wrap the liver in this sack and then bake that in the oven. So, like I said, numerous uses for numerous things. And then the feet and tail you can use for soups and stuff like that. Just again, certain people who, already know how to process these parts of the animal more efficiently than I do. So it's again just finding somebody who's already doing it or wants to do it with you, and then you can kind of experiment together. And then the fat. So my little candle here isn't burning that great right now, but you kind of get a rough idea. Basically what I would do with this guy is I would pour a little bit of the fat off so that it would burn a little bit stronger. So yeah, I'm just gonna do that. Good. So yeah, basically what I've done this year, because I had some fat and as stuff got busy, I was like, okay, I'm gonna process this fat and I'm gonna render it down and I'm gonna use it for lard. So there's two different types of lard that come, or fat that come from the pig. One is your leaf lard, which is all the lard that's found in fat that's on the inside of the pig and around its organs. So you basically can peel that off as it's being processed, or once you've slaughtered it. And then you take that, what we did, we took it right into the house and we basically cooked it down right away. So, and the leaf lard creates a really beautiful lard that you would use for baking. So this lard, because it comes from the inside, it doesn't necessarily have the same strong pork flavor as what you're gonna get on your back fat. So this just shows you how pure and white the lard comes out at right when you render it down from the leaf lard. So yeah, so super good for baking. I haven't quite ventured into making pies yet, but if anybody would want to. So yeah, that's one good thing that it's good for. Some of my lard, I wasn't able to get to right away. It was still cool enough outside, but because I had it in a big plastic box, when I got to the bottom of it as I was trimming it, because typically what you're going to want to do is trim all the meat off before you render it down, and you're going to cut it into small little cubes, or you can get your butcher to grind it down for you, or if you have a grinder, you can grind it down. And grinding it down works the best, so I had mine, this stuff here I had ground, this stuff there we didn't, we had to cut ourselves. But yeah, so what happened with my first batch, because I didn't get to it, or my last batch I should say, I didn't get to it quite quick enough because the fat will hold the heat, right? So as it's warming up wherever it was, by the time I got to the bottom of my box, the fat, I could smell that it had gone rancid. It was just starting to turn, so definitely not something you're gonna wanna eat or even put on your body. So what I did, I decided to make candles with that. And I've discovered, these are still a trial. Melanie was able to buy one. But like I say, I just bought some wicks from PV Mart sells them. They're a little bit expensive, but I'm sure you can find a way to make it not so expensive. So what I did, I bought twine. So I was testing it out with just regular twine, but the twine wasn't quite rigid enough. So that's why I found these were a little bit better. So I'm looking at, again, just alternative ways of getting a better wick, whether it be kind of soaking it in beeswax and then putting it in there, might be, again, a cheaper option to do that. So, and then you can also make soap, right? So the people that I purchased my animals from, their daughter was making soap and selling that at the farmers markets. So, and she basically was creating a good little side business for herself, right? So again, when it comes down to time and how much time you have on your farm, you could probably make enough for yourself, but then again, are you gonna venture out into kind of doing more so and selling it. So like I say, ethically raised animals create meat that is obviously more nutritious and flavorful. And yeah, it's actually a taste that you will be able to taste the difference in the meats. I can tell you I don't buy any meat products from a grocer anymore. Even prior to owning my own animals, I found it really hard to buy pork prior to raising them. So probably about 20 years, I ate very little pork because I was one of the people that could taste the taint in the meat, right? So, like I say, the more that you can raise on your farm or raise for yourself, the better. And there's definitely lots of people out there that are willing to share their knowledge as much as I am, and I'm still learning too, right? So if there's anything that I'm doing wrong, I look for advice and help from other people. And yeah, so like I say, a part of the reason why I am farming is because I feel like I help to bridge the gap between people and their food source. And I like to get to know my consumers. I develop relationships with some of my consumers, and then some of them ask me if they can just outright, can we just be friends? You know, and I'm just like, okay, perfect, you know what I mean? And like I say, building these relationships with people in your community, it just is so amazing. And I don't know, I think that's the greatest thing that has come out of it for me, is that I've been able to connect with more people in the region where I live and put food on their plates. So, yeah, so that's basically what I have for you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So how long have you been doing this on your farm?
So this year was just I just finished my second year.
Second year.
I'm coming into my third, and now I am again breeding again. So, but I'm raising the Kunis, which again, like I say, they're a longer time to finish, but they're an animal that can be pastured, right? So I'm looking at ways of, one, how can I eliminate some of my initial costs, right?
Not
because-
paying that $175.
Yeah, so like basically what you can look at to raise one pig in today's like prices are basically $1,000. That's to for you guys to purchase it, obviously at $175. And then your feed is going to be anywhere from $350 to $400, and then your processing for that whole animal is going to be close to $450 to $500, depending on weight, right? And then you're cutting and you're curing, right? So you got to look at your cost per pound for that, and sausage making. So sausage making, I love to have done because, like, Cito's is a really amazing producer of sausage.
Yeah.
He's one of the best. So yeah, like I say. It's looking at all those things and how much that's going to cost you, and also how you're going to package that too, right? So with a lot of my product that I had in my first year, I vacuum sealed. So vacuum sealing cost basically $2 now, which used to be $1.50, is now $2 per item. So basically I'm selling my product now, and these are costs that I now have to transfer on to my consumer, because if I don't put it onto my consumer, I'm going to be the one taking the cost of that. So regardless of size, you're still going to be paying the same price, right? So I can have a huge ham, again, vacuum sealed in this, and this is going to have a longer shelf life. So initially when I first ventured into this business of farming, I had 13 freezers full of meat, and I had no clientele. So I had a huge liability on my hand, and looking at dispersing of that meat as fast as I could. Because again, it has a shelf life and a quality that it's only going to maintain for so long. And the basic thing that you have to worry about is in the fats, because your fat cereal is going to be what is going to start to degrade first and foremost within your freezer. With that being said, the paper wrap that my butcher uses is a premium, like high quality paper. And my meats lasted no problem 1 year, right? The recommended time, yes, is going to be 4 months for your maximum quality out of that product. But then, like I say, it will still basically hold good for a year. and anything that I would typically have left over in my freezer, I would then take that meat, and pork is especially good for, is to mix with your game if you're a hunter, right, or know anybody that hunts. So you can take that and then just mix those into sausages and so forth. So, but yeah.
Huge learning curve.
Yeah, so like I say, and I come from a background, like I say, a background of farming, and I was a hunter, like I hunted all the time, and I would always turn my freezer over, right? And then coming into having all these animals and going like, oh my gosh, like what was I thinking, first and foremost? But then again, just like, no, it really just taught me perseverance more so than anything. And again, the importance of building community and building relationships with people and trust, you know? So people are gonna want to see what your farm looks like. And in my opinion, it should be pretty sanitary, you know what I mean? Your barn should be clean. Like the cleaner your barn, the less chances you're gonna have of disease, right? Or any illness coming in. And the same reason why we pasture, because it eliminates, like it doesn't eliminate, but it definitely like makes that probability of illness much less, right? And again, keeping a closed herd. So, and like I say, I learned my lesson by buying those animals and having a sick piglet within the first 2 weeks of buying them. And I was freaking out because I know of some of the diseases. Again, speaking to other farmers, they're like, oh my gosh, like you better damn well hope it's not. So you have to quarantine that animal on your property unless you're willing to take the chance, which is not worth the risk. You're almost better off to take that animal out and shoot it right away and dispose of it, right? And again, probably not keep it anywhere near where you're ever gonna have your other animals. So, yeah.
Did it turn out okay?
It did turn out okay once it was medicated. I had to use a very heavy antibiotic that we do not agree with using on our animals, but we had to use it because that was the drug that they used on their animals, and I had to vaccinate that animal probably 3 times. So, and keep it quarantined. And I kept it quarantined until I damn well knew that it was good to go. And even then, I still kept it in its own pasture away from my herd, right? So throughout the season, if anything was to show signs of it being sick again, I knew that it was far enough away from my other animals, and that piece of land, if it means that it lie fallow for 7 years, then so be it. You know what I mean? So, and like again, it's just knowing the risks that are involved when taking on other people's animals. And, you know, it's doing your due diligence is key, I think, because I didn't do my due diligence in that regard, you know. So you can have, again, like a disease that comes onto your property and it will destroy your entire livelihood. And again, why diversity is key. I believe that not only raising one thing, but if you're going to be trying to make money at it, or even a small amount of money to help pay for your feed and stuff, if say one disease comes in and wipes out one of your entire revenues on your farm, you need to still have something that's going to back that up, right? So, and we've seen that again with the avian flu, with the swine flu, like years ago, which has been like, this not around anymore, around here anyways. But yeah, so like I said, I think it's super important to, again, just really know the people and not necessarily taking their word for it, you know, like you have to do your research. Everybody around the region will know maybe more about that person than you do. And not to say that people are going to be bad people, you know what I mean? But they might not know either if they were just getting into the business themselves, right? So, and that's where I find it's like, it's important to know, right? So, yeah.
Does anyone have any more questions?
How many are on your farm working? Is it just you?
It's usually just me.
Oh, wow.
Well, it was me 100% in my first year. Just kind of like moving around. I did have a little bit of help when it comes to needing a bit of a, like feeding them in the interim or moving them so many times. But yeah, I was basically tied to my farm and tied to those animals because I was committed to taking care of them and raising them. Right? So, but, and again, making sure you don't put that onus on anybody else unless they agree to it. Because, yeah, not always the best thing. But
Do you follow any kind of a vaccination protocol for your pigs?
do I? I don't, because like I say, I keep a close herd. I haven't sold any animals off of my farm, and the animals that I did get, they came vaccinated, and I knew the producer and where they kind of came from. So, and like I say, when I did run into problems, is when I was full out, like reaching out to everybody that I knew that had pigs, and to help quickly diagnose what it could potentially be. And again, that's where it's really advantageous, knowing other people who are raising them, because they might have the answers for you, and they might know the drug to quickly use to help turn it around, just like that. So, yeah.
So you brought some items for sale today?
I did bring some if you guys want to see. So I brought some pepperoni because that's just what a lot of people like to buy. And then I did bring some of my I brought some of my bacon for you guys to look at, and just kind of show you what not free feeding looks like. So the ratio to meat, the fat to meat ratio on this is pretty amazing. It's not necessarily what everybody is going to be wanting. I actually prefer a little bit more fat on mine because when you're cooking it, I also save that fat and I cook with it, right? So, and this is just to show you a little bit of like the marbling that kind of happens through like my animals as they're pasture raised and stuff.
So when you save the fat from your bacon, you put it into a jar and refrigerate it?
No, I just keep it right on top of the stove. Okay. So again, like I say, even with rendering the lard, like you can render it down and use it for cooking. So the back fat is what you're going to use for basically cooking with. And yeah, any fat that we ever cook with, residual fat that's left over from the pan, from bacon, definitely put in a jar, and that's all we cook with. We don't use much for butter. Even when we're cooking our eggs, we use pork fat, you know, and it's full of all this. Yeah, healthy, nutritious fats. Yeah.
Is that from your landrace mixes?
Yes, this is from the landrace.
Where do you get your labels made?
So I bought a little label maker from Staples. Okay. And then basically you can just go in there and edit. It's a P-Touch editor. Okay. And yeah, you can buy a whole reel basically for $50 and it makes a ton of labels.
Perfect.
So, yeah.
Because I get my pork done at Cito's too, and they don't do custom labels.
Oh, okay.
So I always, you know, I have Cito stamped on it and what it is.
Yeah.
But
yeah. So yeah, like I say, because I'm selling at market, again, there's lots of rules and regulations about what's to be on it,
okay.
when it was processed, and all the rest. So, and then it also has where your farm is.
Yes.
Now for myself personally, I'm veering more away from giving people my specific address because I don't think it's like if they want to get in touch with you, they can call you and then they can come to
That's
my farm.
right, like a farm name with the phone number.
Yeah, exactly. So I have my phone number on here and yeah, and all the rest. And then all the ingredients obviously has to be listed also.
So Staples, okay.
Yeah, Staples, like I say, it's a really cool little machine. I think it costs anywhere from $150 to $200.
Perfect.
And then the rolls are about $50 and they'll label like a ton of material.
Okay.
So, yeah. And it just looks more professional.
It totally
So,
You're out there tapping?
yeah, I'm out in Tappan, Notch Hill now. Okay. But my little piece of land is in Enderby Grenard. So that's where I was. This year is on my property in Enderby Grenard. Yeah. So, and like I say, you can see here, kind of gives a good example, like it's kind of a bit of a disaster, but my chickens ended up at the bottom of the hill, and then the pigs I was rotating in a big circle and kind of giving them sections of the land. And then, like I say, the older they get, the more they're gonna root too, right? So one way to stop the rooting is to put a ring in their nose, so you can do that, but I've never done that. So, yeah. I hope you guys learned a little bit.
That was very thorough.
Okay.
Do you overseed the areas where your pigs have overrooted?
So I haven't seeded the area on my property, but I can tell you this, the areas where all of my animals were, It is amazing, just the disturbance that they did to those plants of how much they flourished the next year. So I did have to take the harrows and I used a little cat to kind of level out the areas where they dug their holes, but I was overwhelmed with how well my field came back without having to seed it. And I was gonna reseed it, but then again, looking at what crops are gonna do best for what you're raising there too, right? So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Wow, good luck.